a widow, a child, and a spirit guide. The shocking truth behind her husband's past. She had nothing left, just a 3-year-old child, a broken heart, and a mysterious sign from above. Every time she lost her way, an eagle soared overhead, guiding her towards something she didn't yet understand. But what she discovered in the faraway village would change everything. This isn't just a story of love and loss. It's a story of destiny. Before we go deeper, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts below. This is one story you won't forget. Before the silence, the love story of Sarah and Johnny. Sarah never imagined that the man she met in the rain would become the most cherished part of her life, and the most painful loss she'd ever endure. It was 5 years ago. The sky was pouring as if trying to wash away the pain the world carried. Sarah, then a young and vibrant woman with a heart full of ambition, had taken shelter beneath a rusty bus stop sign. Her phone was dead, her bag soaked, and her spirit, admittedly, a little shaken. That's when he appeared. Johnny. He wasn't flashy. No suit, no umbrella, just a calm presence in the chaos. His eyes were tired, yet kind, as though they had seen too much too young. He offered her a dry handkerchief and a warm smile. And that was the beginning of a quiet, powerful love story. Johnny had secrets. That much she knew early on. But he wasn't the kind to run from truth. He embraced it when she asked. He told her everything. Or so she thought. His past was scattered and painful, but his love was whole and real. "I've been running a long time, Sarah," he once told her, staring into the horizon. "But with you, I feel like I've arrived." They built something small, but sacred. A rented apartment with cracked walls that echoed with laughter. Meals cooked together. Nights of stories and whispers under dim light bulbs. And soon, a baby boy, David, who inherited his father's deep eyes and quiet strength. Johnny worked hard. Odd jobs, side gigs, small business ideas. Sarah stood by him, her faith never shaking, even when money got tight or when past traumas made Johnny distant. She believed in him more than anything else in the world. What made their love so compelling wasn't perfection. It was resilience. He had a way of protecting her without words. He would hold her hand when she was scared. She would brush his hair when he couldn't sleep. Together, they survived days that would have broken other couples. But 1 year before this journey began, everything shattered. Johnny didn't come home one night. There was no call, no note, just silence. The police later told her he was killed. An unsolved case, still under investigation. The man who had promised her forever was gone, just like that. And all she had left was a 3-year-old child and questions that no one could answer. She grieved. Oh, she grieved. Nights blurred into mornings. She screamed, cried, and whispered into the silence of their apartment. Her son David would sometimes stare into the corner of the room and say, "Daddy Bird." It broke her heart and soothed her soul at the same time. Then, strange things began to happen. An eagle, not just any bird, a powerful, majestic eagle, would appear above her whenever she got lost. The first time, she dismissed it. The second time, she felt shivers. By the third time, she knew deep down, Johnny was guiding her. He had once told her that in his tribe, eagles were messengers of spirits. "If I ever leave before my time," he had said with a teasing smile, "I'll come back as an eagle. You'll know it's me." She never thought those words would feel so real. And so, she made a decision, a powerful, irrational, spirit-led decision. She would find Johnny's roots, his people, his village. He had spoken of them only briefly, with pain in his voice. "Abia," he had whispered one night, before drifting off to sleep. That's where it all began. That was her only clue. She packed her bags, took her son, and called her 2 most trusted friends, Amaka and Ruth. Women who had stood with her in grief and joy alike. "We're going to find them," she said. "I don't know how, but I believe he'll show us the way." They laughed at first. Then they cried. Then they agreed. And so, with nothing but hope, a few photos, a fading memory, and the spirit of an eagle leading the way, the three women and a child set off on a journey that would unlock the shocking truth about Johnny's past, reunite lost families, and test the limits of love beyond death. The weight of love and the fight for survival. After Johnny's sudden death, Sarah's world became a fragile maze of unanswered questions and unbearable silence. Each day without him was a battle against despair, and every breath felt heavier. But amid that darkness, she held tightly to one thing: the love they had built together, the bond that refused to die even in the absence of his body. Johnny hadn't always been the man Sarah fell in love with. When they first met, he was lost, burdened by a past he rarely spoke about. She could see it in his eyes, that quiet storm of someone running from something or someone. But Sarah never pushed. She loved him gently. She offered warmth when his soul was cold. And in return, Johnny gave her his heart, even if it was still stitched with scars. Before their love blossomed, Johnny had been a drifter, jumping from town to town, trying to bury the ghosts of his past under the weight of hard labor and solitude. He worked construction jobs during the day and slept in cramped hostels at night. There was always something chasing him, not physically, but emotionally. It wasn't until he met Sarah that he felt he could finally stop running. Sarah, on the other hand, was full of light. She was strong-willed, soft-spoken, and relentlessly kind. Her friends often joked that she had the patience of a saint. When she met Johnny, she saw beyond the shadows. She saw the man he was becoming, not the one his past tried to define. Their love was not just romantic. It was redemptive. It was survival. It was healing. They built a life together from nothing, literally. When they moved into their first home, it was barely livable. But Sarah made it a home. She painted the cracked walls, bought second-hand furniture, and turned it into a space of peace. Johnny worked double shifts. He sold handmade items on the street, and slowly, they built something real. Then came David, their son, their miracle. Johnny held him for the first time and wept, not just tears of joy, but of relief. Like he had finally found the purpose that had eluded him for so long. "He's my second chance," Johnny whispered one night, holding the baby close. "He's the reason I'll never run again." But life wasn't done testing them. Money was tight. Johnny had dreams of starting a small furniture-making business. He was good with his hands, a craftsman. He would stay up late, sanding and shaping wood, creating beauty from roughness, much like his life. Sarah supported him, doing online freelance work and helping him promote the small business they started from their backyard. For a while, things looked up. The orders started to come in. They even saved enough to get a small truck for deliveries. But success, however small, attracted attention. Not all of it good. Johnny had a business partner, a man named Martins. Charming, persuasive, and seemingly loyal. At first, Martins helped grow the business. He brought in clients and negotiated deals. But Sarah never truly trusted him. She couldn't explain why. There was something too polished about him, too slick. Johnny defended him. "He's been good to me, Sarah. He's helping us." But one evening, Johnny came home shaken. He had found discrepancies in their financial records. Money was missing. Deals had been made without his consent. He confronted Martins, and the conversation turned ugly. Martins denied everything and stormed out. That night, Johnny sat quietly by the window. "I made a mistake," he said. "I trusted the wrong man." Sarah tried to calm him, to reassure him that they'd fix it together. But Johnny's instincts were sharp. Something was coming. Something bad. Days later, Johnny received a threat. Anonymous, but unmistakable. Back off or disappear. Sarah begged him to go to the police, but he refused. That'll only escalate things, he said. I'll handle it. And then, he vanished. The police told Sarah that Johnny had been found dead in an abandoned warehouse. An apparent robbery gone wrong. But Sarah knew better. Johnny never wandered aimlessly, and he certainly wasn't someone to get caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. There were no arrests, no suspects, just a cold file and a colder home. Sarah was shattered. Her son barely understood what was happening. He kept asking, "Where's Daddy?" And she would just hold him tightly, fighting back tears. The grief turned to fury, then to determination. She started asking questions. She confronted Martins, but he denied everything. He even had the audacity to say, "Maybe Johnny wasn't who you thought he was." That was the moment something inside her snapped. She needed answers. Real answers. She remembered the few times Johnny had spoken about his past. About a place called Abia, about a family he'd left behind, about a name he no longer used. He once mentioned running from something bigger than himself. A family rift that had cost him everything. She realized there might be people out there who knew the truth. Maybe his family could tell her what Johnny never did. Maybe they'd understand what she was going through, or help her make sense of what happened. But there was no address, no map, no contact, just the word, Abia. That's when the signs began. The eagle. It showed up the first time she prayed desperately for direction. It soared above her home, circled 3 times, and vanished into the clouds. It happened again when she considered giving up. Then again when she whispered, "Johnny, where do I go?" And so, with a bag of essentials, her son on her hip, and 2 brave friends at her side, Sarah set off on a journey not just to uncover Johnny's past, but to reclaim her future. They would face dead roads, muddy paths, and moments of hopelessness. But with every wrong turn, the eagle returned, always appearing just when she needed a sign. Little did she know, the road ahead would not only bring her face to face with Johnny's hidden family, but with a truth more shocking than she ever imagined. The kind of life and business. As Sarah and her 2 friends, Amaka and Ruth, navigated through the winding, muddy paths that led to the unknown, her thoughts kept circling back to Johnny's life, the life she thought she knew. The more she reflected, the more she realized that she had only scratched the surface of the man she loved. Johnny had been a man of dualities. On the outside, he was quiet, reserved, and often lost in thought, but he had a spark within him, an undeniable energy that drew people to him. He was someone who could speak in soft tones, yet command attention. But his business dealings, his work ethic, and even his aspirations were far more complex than she had ever fully understood. They had met when Sarah was in her mid-20s, a time when her life was filled with aspirations of a career, adventure, and independence. But Johnny's arrival had shaken that vision of her future. With him, she learned the quiet strength of building something from the ground up. Together, he had dreams, not of wealth, but of creating a lasting impact, a legacy that would be more than just numbers on a bank statement. Johnny believed that true value came from the way people were treated, how they felt after interacting with him, and the work he poured into everything he touched. At first, Johnny didn't talk much about his past or his plans. But as their relationship deepened, he began sharing fragments of his history. He had grown up in a family that valued hard work above all else. But his ambitions had always been different. Johnny's family in Abia, he once told her, had business interests in farming and trade. They had prospered, but at a price that Johnny was unwilling to pay. And so, he left. "People in my family, they value money and power over people," Johnny had explained one night, as they lay on their couch after a long day. "But I never agreed with them. I wanted something different. I wanted to make a life based on trust, not manipulation." His words echoed in her mind now, as they drove deeper into unfamiliar terrain, unsure if the road they were on would even lead them to the village, much less to the answers she desperately sought. His family, his background. It was all a puzzle she had only begun to try to piece together. Johnny's career had always been a reflection of his values. After leaving his family, he set out on his own, determined to carve his own path in life. He didn't want to work for someone else. He wanted to create something he could be proud of, a business that had meaning beyond profits. He started small, building handcrafted wooden furniture. It was a trade he had learned from an old mentor in a small village, a trade he had fallen in love with after realizing the beauty of creating something from raw material. The first time Johnny showed her one of his pieces, Sarah was amazed at the craftsmanship. The way the wood gleamed, the care that had gone into every joint, every smooth curve, was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The furniture wasn't just functional, it was art. "I want to build a brand, Sarah," Johnny had said, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "I want to show people the power of something real, something they can feel, touch, and connect with. Not just cheap stuff from the store, but real, handcrafted beauty." So, together, they began building that brand. Johnny would work late into the night, sanding, polishing, and finishing the pieces by hand. Sarah would help with marketing, setting up their small online store, and taking photos of their products to share on social media. Their business grew, albeit slowly. But it wasn't about the speed of their success. It was about the authenticity of their work. Johnny's creations spoke for themselves, and over time, they gained a loyal following. People admired the craftsmanship and integrity behind each piece. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As their business grew, so did the challenges. Their finances were tight, especially at the start. Johnny's dreams of expanding to a larger workshop and hiring additional help often collided with the reality of the bills they had to pay. He was a perfectionist, often refusing to take shortcuts, which sometimes meant longer hours and less profit. But Sarah never minded. She supported him, even when they didn't have much. It was during this period that Johnny became involved with Martins. Martins was a charismatic businessman who seemed to have connections in all the right places. At first, he appeared to be the perfect partner, someone who could help take their business to the next level. He had a network of clients, a sharp mind for deals, and the kind of ambitious drive that matched Johnny's. But Johnny's trusting nature, his belief that people could change, led him into a partnership that would eventually prove to be his undoing. Sarah remembered the day Johnny had introduced her to Martins. It was a sunny afternoon, and the two men sat on their small porch, discussing plans for the future. Martins had talked about expanding into new markets, about partnering with larger companies, and about leveraging their combined resources to create something truly successful. Johnny had been hesitant at first, but Martin's persuasive charm won him over. But as time went on, Sarah began to notice cracks in the facade. Martins was always just a little too polished, a little too smooth. His promises always seemed to be just out of reach. And then there was the way he would talk about money, how much it could solve, how much power it could bring. Johnny, on the other hand, always seemed uncomfortable when the conversation turned to the financial side of things. He valued people, not profits, and that was where the conflict began. Eventually, Johnny began to realize that Martins was not the partner he had hoped for. The financial discrepancies were only the tip of the iceberg. Martin's dealings were shady, and it became clear that his interest in the business was less about craftsmanship and more about control. But by then, it was too late. The partnership had already taken root, and Martins wasn't about to let go. It was this business betrayal, this breach of trust, that led to Johnny's untimely death. The police report claimed it was a botched robbery, but Sarah knew better. Martins was involved. She could feel it in her bones. As the car rumbled along the muddy road, Sarah couldn't help but wonder. Had Johnny's family known about Martin's? Had they known what Johnny had been up against all those years? She didn't have the answers yet, but she was getting closer. The revelation. The heavy rain began to fall as Sarah, Amaka, and Ruth continued their journey. The sight of the towering trees around them blurred in the mist, and the muddy road seemed to stretch endlessly before them. But amidst the storm, there was an eerie calm that Sarah couldn't quite place. An overwhelming sense that something monumental was about to unfold. Her heart raced as they neared the village of Abia. But it wasn't just the proximity to Johnny's family that set her pulse pounding. It was the feeling she had carried with her since Johnny's death. The feeling that his spirit was still close, guiding her every step of the way. Johnny had always been an enigmatic soul, a man of many layers. He had been kind, loving, and devoted to Sarah. But his life had been filled with shadows, hidden fears, and unspoken battles. No one knew the full extent of what he had gone through. Not even Sarah. He had often shielded her from the darker side of his past, wanting to protect her from the pain he had buried deep within him. But as their life together unfolded, she began to see glimpses of the torment he carried with him. And now, as she ventured toward his family, it was as though those buried secrets were finally surfacing. The car slowed as they approached a dirt road that led off the main path. Sarah could make out the shapes of houses ahead, and the faint sounds of voices carried in the distance. Her heart leaped in her chest. It was here. This was where Johnny's family had lived. The family he had left behind when he chose a different life, a life with her. Amaka and Ruth exchanged worried glances as the car bumped along the rough terrain. The rain was coming down harder now, and the windshield wipers could barely keep up with the torrents that splashed across the glass. Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She felt a cold chill run down her spine, a sign that the moment of truth was approaching. As they entered the village, the landscape was starkly different from the city life she had known. The houses were simple, built with local materials, and surrounded by lush greenery. Children played in the mud, their laughter echoing through the air, while women sat outside, chatting and weaving baskets. There was a certain rawness to the life here, a simplicity that made her feel both out of place and strangely at home. She drove slowly, scanning the faces of the villagers. Her eyes flicked from one person to the next, hoping, praying for someone who might recognize her, someone who might know Johnny. It felt as though she were walking into the unknown, a place where the past and present would collide in ways she couldn't imagine. Then, as if by fate, she saw them. A group of men stood near a small market stall, chatting amongst themselves. One of them caught her eye, a tall man with weathered skin and a deep scar across his cheek. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't quite place. She pulled the car over and rolled down the window, her hands shaking. Amaka and Ruth sat quietly in the back, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Excuse me," Sarah called out, her voice trembling. "I'm looking for the family of Johnny, my husband. He used to live here, but we've been apart for many years." The man with the scar narrowed his eyes and stepped forward, his gaze piercing. There was silence for a moment before he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Johnny," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "Johnny. He left a long time ago. We thought he was lost to us. No one's heard from him for years. Are you sure? You're his wife?" Sarah nodded, holding back the tears that threatened to spill over. She reached for her purse, pulling out a photo of Johnny, a picture taken on their wedding day, his smile as bright and hopeful as the future they had shared. The man took the photo in his hands, staring at it for several moments, before looking back at Sarah, his face unreadable. He muttered something under his breath, and then, with a deep sigh, he passed the photo to his companions. "We've been waiting for this day," the man said, his voice tinged with a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. But we never imagined it would come like this. Follow me. Sarah's heart raced as she turned to Amaka and Ruth, who shared in her confusion and anticipation. They followed the man through the village, their footsteps muffled by the thick mud. The further they walked, the more the village seemed to close in on them, as if the land itself held its breath. Finally, they arrived at a modest home, its walls adorned with photographs and trinkets, reminders of a past long gone. Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat as the man opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with emotion. The room was dimly lit by candles, and several elderly women sat around a fire, quietly talking. As soon as they saw Sarah, their eyes widened, and a collective gasp filled the room. The air seemed to crackle with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Johnny's wife," one of the women whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. After all these years, Sarah stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. She felt the weight of the room upon her, the eyes of Johnny's family all trained on her. She could sense their curiosity, their longing to know the truth of what had happened to their son, to the brother they had lost. She cleared her throat and began to speak, her voice faltering at first. "I'm Sarah, Johnny's wife. We were married a few years ago, and we have a son, your grandson." As she spoke, she held out the picture of their child, their 3-year-old son, whose face mirrored Johnny's so perfectly it was uncanny. The room fell silent, and for a long moment, no one moved. Then, one of the women stood up, her hands shaking as she took the picture from Sarah's hand. She stared at it, and tears began to flow freely down her face. "This is Johnny's son," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He looks just like him." For the first time in years, Johnny's family felt something they hadn't known since his disappearance: hope. And in that moment, Sarah knew that this was the reason she had come, the reason Johnny's spirit had led her here. The pain, the loss, the uncertainty of the past. It had all been building toward this moment of reunion. But the truth of what had happened to Johnny was still unclear. What had happened to him all those years ago? And what of the man who had betrayed him? The business partner who had played a role in his death? Johnny's spirit had fought to protect them. But now, Sarah realized, the fight was far from over. The conclusion. The room was filled with an air of heavy silence. Sarah stood at the center, surrounded by Johnny's family, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined that she would find herself here, in this small village, meeting the family of the man she had loved and lost. But now that she was here, there was an undeniable sense of fulfillment, a closure that had eluded her for so long. Johnny's family, though initially stunned, now looked at her with a mix of awe, sorrow, and gratitude. His mother, the woman who had given birth to him, was holding their grandson in her arms. The resemblance was so uncanny that it felt like Johnny had never left. It was as if he had returned to them in the form of his son, his legacy carried on in the eyes of the child. As Sarah looked around the room, she saw the faces of those who had once known Johnny. Some of them were crying, their grief finally spilling over after all these years. But there was something more in their tears: joy. Joy that their lost son had not truly vanished from their lives, but had instead come back in ways they could not have imagined. But as Sarah began to speak again, the joy in the room began to feel heavier. She knew there was more to this story. Johnny's past, the man who had betrayed him, and the circumstances of his death were still shrouded in mystery. And though Johnny's spirit had led her to this place, she knew that the final chapters of his story were not yet written. Johnny's spirit had been with her the entire way, guiding her through the treacherous road, the muddy path, the uncertain journey. It was clear to her now that his death had not been in vain. His life had been one of sacrifice, of protecting those he loved, and even in death, he had fought to protect her and their child. But what of the future? What would happen now that they had found Johnny's family? The questions swirled in her mind, And though she didn't have all the answers, she knew that she was not alone anymore. She had a family, a community, a place where she could finally heal. As the evening wore on, Johnny's family gathered around her, offering comfort and warmth. Sarah, though exhausted, felt a deep sense of peace. She held her son close, looking into his innocent eyes and whispering a promise she had made to herself long ago. To honor Johnny's memory, to protect their son, and to build a future where the darkness of the past could no longer hold them captive. And as the flickering firelight cast its glow across the room, Sarah knew that Johnny's spirit would always be with her. His journey may have ended, but hers was just beginning. The future, though uncertain, held the possibility of healing, redemption, and a new life. One where love, family, and the guidance of a spirit that refused to let them go would carry them forward. If you found this story moving, heart-wrenching, and unforgettable, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Share your thoughts below, and stay tuned for the next chapter in the journey of Sarah, Johnny, and the family that finally came together.